So a little backstory before I tell you one of the crazy experiences of mine that happened during my 2-year security career from 2013 to 2015. I'm a 6'7" male in Australia. I'd like to think I'm a fairly tough and intimidating guy. But some of the stuff that used to go on at that model I used to work the night shift for still gives me goosebumps to this day. So the only work that was very, very large, probably the largest in my state, I'd say, now all the way up to about 8:30 p.m. it would still be quite busy. Only around 930 would we manage to usher all of the stragglers out, and only at about 11 p.m. will all of the business owners have left. My job was basically to patrol the mall and make sure that was no one sticking around after the doors were closed during the night. We didn't have guns or batons, only a can of mace that was very rarely used. There were multiple occasions where we would find would-be thieves hiding around trying to break in the shops after dark. But they were normally far outnumbered by the 4 to 5 of us on shift at a time. They would usually be intimidated by me or some of the other imposing members of security. This one night though, things started getting really weird for me in the night shift. So I'd say it was about 2 o'clock and I was standing in the middle of the empty food court eating a sandwich. This was the only part of the mall that had any light at nighttime due to the skylight, so it was comfortable to eat there. While it was eating though, I heard adults scraping noise from the hallway leading off from the food courts into some toilets. It sounded like a piece of metal dragging across the floor. I was immediately put on edge and I flicked on my torch light without a moment of hesitation. I could remember creeping down the hallway, flashlight in hand, illuminating a good 6 to 7 meters in front of me. As it got closer and closer to the end of the hall, the noise became louder and louder until I was at the end of the hallway and there was the toilet doors to the left and right of me. I could tell the sound was coming from the female toilets though. I gripped the handle and opened the door a tiny little crack that the ice was now very clear and had me not scared but confused. So I yelled, "Oh, who's in there?" The noise quickly stopped. I paused a moment, listening hard through the tiny crack of the door, and I swear to God, I could hear breathing, low male breathing. I shut the door, still gripping the handle tightly, and flicked on my radio. "This is 1-3. I need help and food court bathrooms. I think someone's here." No response. This was really strange. And it put me further on edge. Policy was to always answer the radio. And now I was truly becoming quite alarmed. "This is 1-3, does anyone copy?" Still no response. I can remember whispering to myself, "What is going on?" I again opened the door a tiny crack. "Listen, Knight," I said, sounding as intimidating as possible. "If you don't come out with your hands up, you're going to end up eating your teeth, Knight. Do you want that?" I sat there at the door, quite honestly terrified at this point. But there was no response. In fact, there was no noise at all. I yelled into the bathroom, "Okay, mate, I'm coming in. If you do anything stupid, it's not my fault. You'll never walk again." I tried my hardest to sound scary, but my voice was quivering at this point. This whole situation made no sense at all. Why would someone be in the female bathrooms? What was the metal noise? What was even happening? Very slowly opened the door and scanned my flashlight across the room. All the cubicles were open, which was weird. But other than that, the room was totally empty. I was crapping myself about now. I was definitely losing it. I walked into the center of the bathroom, closing the door behind me, scared to the core. I let out a faint, "This is some horror movie stuff right here, come out," when I heard the long winding squeak at the door behind me. I spent around basically crying at this point and shone my torch on a massive man, at least a head taller than me, or so it seemed in my state at the time. It was Caucasian, at least in his 40s, with matte gray hair all over his forehead. He was meant to open the door, but he stopped dead stone in middle of his action. He just looked at me, smiling this guilty smile like a kid would make when he gets caught stealing biscuits or something like that. I'm not going to lie. I was so scared. I froze. He lifted his finger to his mouth. Sheesh, before swinging the door all the way open and sprinting out with what looked like some type of small metal box in his hand. Turns out he was behind the toilet door when I was opening it, and I totally missed him. I was so close to him. I didn't even notice him. He could have killed me if he had a knife or something. And that thought still haunts me to this day. Later that night, my radio miraculously started working again, and I got right on telling my co-workers about my story. They collectively went pale when I told them what happened. They all had similar stories, but none that were as much of a close shave as mine. I worked the night shift at that mall for another week after that before I quit. I'm not sticking around in a job like that. I needed help. And for some reason, my radio screwed the pooch. Why? I may never know. I was walking with my dad in the mall. 9:19 at the time, a seller of a car was talking of a giveaway that they were going to make. I signed up, but my dad was extremely rude as always because in his words, the guy wasn't a good seller. I told him, "Dad, stop and give the papers back to the guy." So we were leaving and the seller came running to tell me I forgot to write my number in the application. I did. I need to point out that back then I was nice and polite with strangers. Not anymore. So I get home and an unknown number texted me. The conversation kind of went like this. "Hi, beautiful. Sorry, I don't have you on my contacts list." "Who is this?" "It's me, the seller from the mall." "What? Why is this guy texting me?" I hate when guys call me beautiful to flirt with me. But this was beyond my limits. He goes on saying Dan was a bit grumpy. But he seems so nice and beautiful. Actually, you didn't have to write your cell phone number in the application. But I really wanted to talk to you again. I froze. So unprofessional from the sky. I don't know if that guy thought I was going to see that as romantic, but it just came off as incredibly creepy. I was dumb at the time. So the guy kept pushing a conversation. And I answered back with short sentences until he stopped texting me. I blocked his number. I realized now I either should have told my dad or filed a formal complaint the mall. But that was back when I was an old me. The new me wouldn't stand for that at all. 16-year-old female, and I recently asked my mom about this since I don't remember all the details. When I was 3 years old, I lived in Ohio and was what we call the happy child, rarely cried, always smiled. Loved to talk to people. I also looked really adorable. Short red hair, green eyes, love wearing a yellow polka dot dress with Minnie Mouse spins. I also had a really high-pitched squeaky voice. I wouldn't say it was annoying, but you could definitely tell if I was talking and what I had to say. That's what's really important to keep in mind. It was sometime in the summer. My dad worked at a DVD company before the days of Netflix. So it was just mommy and me time. On this particular day, my mom took me to the mall to shop around since she was expecting a baby boy. And me being the happy little kid I was, came with her to help, which was just to run around stores, look at toys and stuff kids do. When we got to the Gap, I was really bored and was starting to get cranky. But my mom said if I was good, I would get to go to Build-A-Bear into a 3-year-old. That place was like heaven. I decided to sit at the front of the store and pretend to be a mannequin. My mom was cool with it since she wasn't that far away. And people walking by smiled and waved at me. That is until I saw a creepy guy. The way this certain mall was set up, there were benches in front of certain stores near small carts that sold random things and trash bins. Well, this bench faced directly at the Gap. And usually other moms would sit there with strollers and tried to calm down their screaming kids. My mom told me that later since I couldn't remember anything other than the rest. But this guy, he just sat on the end of the bench and stared directly at me, was looking the over. This dude was the most disgusting man I have ever seen in my life. Long, greasy, unkempt hair, black hair, dark green torn and stained shirt, ripped and dirty jeans. Long greasy beard. This dude was gross. But me being the friendly 3-year-old I was, waved and smiled at him. A smile at the most creepy smile. I could remember how yellow his teeth were as he waved at me. At this point, I didn't feel scared or threatened. I just thought that a nice man smiled at me. Then climbed out from the mannequin display area, was about to go to my mom when I heard him behind me. "Hey sweetie, what's your name?" I quickly turned around and saw this dude, now kneeling at my height, smiling at me. "I'm Madeline" is along the lines of what I probably said. "Nice to meet you." Tony, how old are you?" he said to me, not seeing what was wrong with this. I told him my age. "Well, 3. That's really cool. Say, do you like candy?" Now I'm older. I really facepalm at knowing that this dude was using the whole candy stick, and that I was actually falling for it. "Yeah, I like chocolate and gummy bears and lollipops." Again, I don't remember word for word what I said, but it was along those lines, or really me to say the candy store has a ton of gummy bears. "Why don't you come with me and pick out all the candy you want?" It was then that he stood and held his hand out for me. An innocent little me gladly took his hand and began jump around excitedly. But as my hand was in his, my heart sank, and my excitement immediately died. This dude began to drag me up by my hand until I hear the best thing I could hear in that moment. "Hey, get away from my kid." My mom screamed this points. I think literally everyone's head turned toward my mom. I have never seen my mom so angry in my life. But at that moment, she went into full mama bear mode. My mom told me that the man looked down at me, looked back at my mom before letting go of my hand and running as fast as he could out of the store. My mom literally ran to me and pulled me into the tightest hug a very pregnant woman can do. And by then, security had come and started searching the whole mall. By then it was long gone. To give a little background information, I was 13 when this happened, around 5', 195 pounds, and the usual European-looking girl, blue eyes, light skin, light hair. So not very intimidating at all. My friend who was with me is this heavily set ethnic-looking friend. He was 15 at the time. My friend and I had just finished shopping for Halloween costumes. And we were sitting outside the mall at around 6 p.m.-ish. So it was still light out, but kind of hard for me to make out details of objects. We were sitting on the trolley rail within 5 meters from the kitchen, right as father was going to pick us up from. We were chatting and basically just messing around with Snapchat filters and sending videos of ourselves to friends. This area in Australia is very known in my state for bogans and druggies. I see this man walking from person to person looking very homeless. I have some pity for him and I nudge my friend. "Let's call him Henry," directing his attention towards the homeless man. He goes rigid and keeps his eyes trained on the guy at all time. Obviously a bit intimidated. Of course he comes up to us and I give him a long look over. He's this 5'8" man, dark skin, sores and scabs all along his face. His clothing is all ratty and caked in dirt. He reeks like death and obvious drugs. His eyes are very bloodshot and I'm thinking he's either on drugs or alcohol or maybe both. As he's got an empty vodka bottle with a disgusting smelling liquid similar to the leftovers from homemade drugs. "Got any change?" he asked me, his eyes obviously drawn in my body, and I feel disgusted. As I have a very childish body and I don't look very old. With this 40-something man staring at me like a piece of meat. I'm too scared to even answer, so I simply shake my head. He sneers at me and looks at my friend, asking the same question. Henry, being the idiot he is, opens his wallet to check, flashing his bright yellow $50 note, and the druggie notices it and reaches out and realizing what he's done and quickly closes his wallet, says, "No, sorry, mate. I don't have any." He glares at me. I don't even know why I wasn't the one with 50 bloody bucks, and bares his disgusting teeth. all blackish yellow, and his breath reeks of vodka and something similar to rotting meat. He then steps forward. So we're almost chest to chest, and he looks down at me. And he's too shocked to do anything, and I can't step backward, says, my back is pressed against the trolley return bar. My adrenaline kicks in, and I assume an offense position. Fists obviously raised, and I glare back at him, attempting to intimidate him. This didn't work. He eventually steps backwards and walks off. Number 4 calling us a couple of names. Henry, of course, does the stupidest thing he can do then and calls out. Oh boy, said I was sorry, bro. This causes the guy to turn around and stalk over to us. It gets right and close, making sure we can't move away without bumping into him. He gets right up in Henry's space and says, what are you gotta say, you bloody wug? Henry, as I said, belongs to ethnic culture, is something like Greek, Italian, and Irish. So the word wug makes him angry very much, so he gets obviously ticked off and stands up and gets right into this guy, his shoulder pressed into his chest, and RE is a good 6'1" 262. So he easily towered over the sky, basically breathing into a space. The drugget backs off and runs towards the bus station across the road, asking the people under the shelter for the money. I completely lose it at this point, shaking and talking incoherently, whilst Henry calls his dad and tells him to hurry up because Katmy was in trouble. His dad arrived shortly, and he asked us to get in the car and didn't take care of that. Some guy just scared the life out of us. He promptly drives me home, yelling at Henry the whole time. He pulls into my street and I get out and sprint home, now scared of just even being outside. I run inside and my dad sees that I'm obviously shaken up, calls the police and tries to get the appearance of the drug out of me whilst I'm having a mini panic attack. The police are very helpful and send a car to the mall to check for the guy, coming up with nothing. The people who we sent were absolutely lovely and kept monitoring that place for a good month or two. I'd like to say it ends here, but sadly, it does not. That same year, I got a job at a small store in that very same mall. I hadn't seen this druggie for a good few months, and the police never came up with anything, so they completely forgot about it. At my work, we get pretty festive during Christmas with Santa hats and reindeer antlers. So we obviously did the same during Easter. I had myself a cute little pair of ears and a cotton tail to go with it. On the registers, we joked around a lot and were always having conversations with our frequent customers. I was in a very good mood as I had such a lovely conversation with a lady and we were all laughing at her jokes. I called for the next customer to come over to me and I start scanning a few items before hear this guy start talking to me. Cute as a girl, like you shouldn't be dressing so adorable. It was such horrible boys working with you. The boys I worked with are absolutely lovely and they have never made a comment about my bunny getup. I look up and freeze. The same druggy guy from before is there and try to keep my cool. I start silently crying and continue serving him before he makes a disgusting comment about me having to dress up some time for him in his home. I knew what he was getting at. And I was horrified that he'd say that to an underage girl. The boy in the register next to me hears and stalks over to my register, standing directly beside me, just staring the guy down. This guy looks obviously ticked off and says, "Oh, we might just talking to this love the girl." He reads my name tag and says Kat, and I haven't such a nice conversation, aren't we? I choke out a yes and reply, and my friend sees them visibly scared. He basically moves me out of the way and finish the transaction for me before telling my duty manager to make sure that that guy can't come back in. I've worked at that store since, and I've only ever seen the guy once more. The same boy pushed me into the small room that the money machines were in and told me to stay put until that guy left the store. The managers were pretty ticked off that I wasn't working for a good 15 minutes, but the boy informed them of what had happened with me and that frickin' creep. 7 years ago, I was pregnant with my daughter. My niece, 15 at the time, would come with me to the local mall so I could walk around in endless circles trying to induce labor. It was a rare mild break in the weather. So we sat outside for a bit, enjoying the brief warmth before yet another snowstorm would pummel us. While sitting there, a guy walked over to us. He seemed a bit sketchy. Probably a bit older than my 24 years. "Hey there." He smiled, showing yellow dirty teeth. I forced a polite smile, not really wanting to talk. He focused his attention on my niece and Justin. "Who are you?" Reluctantly she answered. "I'm Ashlyn." "Cool, cool. I'm 19, how old are you?" Ash glanced over at me. I was trying not to pull the face. 19, my big pregnant, but I'm 15, she answered. This went on for a while. Just short, polite answers. Finally, he started to get a bit weird, turning his attention to me. I took care to make sure my wedding ring was highly visible. And he didn't take the hint. I finally tried to politely excuse us instead of leaving us alone. He proceeded to follow us inside to try to get him to go away. I feigned baby on the bladder and pulled my niece into the bathroom with me. "What's up with this guy?" asked Test. "Thanks for having to pay." "I didn't have to. He just gave me the creeps. Especially the whole year, beautiful pregnant woman. I would be thrilled if you were mine." I cringed. "Let's hang out in here for a while, before we go back out. Hopefully he'll be gone." We waited about 10 minutes before venturing back out. Looking around, I was relieved that he was nowhere in sight. We conferred real fast and decided that we would go on the walk as planned. Just a few circuits. We were closing in on the bookstore, with its tall floor-to-ceiling glass front. That's when I caught him following us. He was being sure to stay just far enough behind that we wouldn't realize he was there, but I caught his reflection. I nudged Ash and pointed towards the bookstore, hoping she could see the same reflection I did. "Come on. Let's go ahead and take a look. I know you hate books, but I want to see if they have anything new." We ducked in, thankful for being short. It allowed us to disappear behind low shelves. Again, we waited it out and we didn't see him around before continuing our track. But yet again, I caught a glimpse of him not far behind us. "Oh my God." I groaned under my breath. "He's still there," I whispered to Ash. This time she grabbed my arm and dragged me into Victoria's Secret. Oh, yes, perfect store for a woman who was 9 months pregnant. This time, we decided to head back for the doors and get out of there. Neither of us was comfortable with this creep behind us. Before taking the exit, we looked around carefully, making sure he was actually gone. We didn't see him. We hurried to my car. And thank goodness for reserved pregnancy parking. The next night, I turn on the news. It was the usual politics. Then local news. A man who had been arrested for a brutal beating of a local pregnant woman. He was caught in the act. The mugshot flashed up, and my jaw dropped. It was the creep from the mall who had attacked the woman the day before. The same day we had been to the mall. He attacked her in the parking lot. Live in a fairly small city, but we have a pretty impressive mall called Destiny USA. It's huge, like 7 stories in some parts. It's the 6th largest mall in the US, or something like that. You're probably wondering why I'm rambling on about this, but it plays a part in the story. Like normal teenagers, me and my best friend at the time were there quite often. One Saturday, my dad dropped us off at around 330. And we began walking around about 2 hours after we got there. These 2 guys make really loud and unnecessary gross comments to each other about us as we walked by the main shore. We heard 2 were staring us down. We were only 14 at the time. We've gotten catcalled quite a few times, despite our age. Disgusting, I know. So we didn't really think anything of it at first. Not even 2 minutes later, I look back for whatever reason and realize the 2 guys from before are walking behind us. I'm a little uneasy from this, but not too worried. But I tell my friends anyways, and we decided to keep going and take unexpected turns in the stores to make sure that they weren't following us. We went into various stores on that floor. And when we came out, they were always lingering nearby a bench, but not actually sitting down. And they always begin walking again as soon as we exit the store. At this point, we were panicking as neither of us were large or intimidating girls. That was only 5'2", and she stood at a mere 4'9", and neither of us weighed any more than 105 pounds. We speed walk to the nearest elevator, try not to let them know that we caught on to them following us. We pushed a random button and ended up getting off on the floor underneath the one we were previously on. We walked around for a while until we saw the same guys coming from the opposite direction towards us. My friend alerts me about it. And we go back the way we came from and took the escalator up to another floor, then run over to a section of the mall that was recently built. After we're a good distance into the new section, the mall, we start peeking over the railing onto the floor below us. It doesn't take long for these two idiots to show up. They're frantically looking around trying to figure out where we were. As I mentioned before, our mall is huge. It's super unlikely to see the same person twice, let alone multiple times in a matter of 15 minutes. I start planning in my head what we were going to do, but I soon realized that since they were directly underneath us, even if we decided to take off, there's a balcony sort of thing on all of the floors that allows you to look both down the floors below you and above you onto higher floors, which means they could see us pretty much anywhere we decided to go. We try sneaking into a nearby store and out of view of these two creeps, all the while praying that they don't look up to the floor above them. And just then we heard it loud. There they are. Come on, let's go. We look back and one of the guys is pointing at us. And they're both looking at us with this angry expression. They start booking it to one of the escalators that leads to the floor we are currently on. Me and my friend are in full panic mode by now. She's hyperventilating and I feel like I'm going to throw up, so we start hauling it trying to get away from them. We continue running, starting to slow down from exhaustion. But now the two dudes are off the escalator and are almost directly adjacent from us. My friend tells me to text my dad to tell him that we were ready to leave, and to get to his car from the parking lot and bring it up front to the entrance to pick us up. Luckily, my dad usually drops us off, then does shopping of his own while we're walking around. Therefore, if anything happens, he isn't far away, and we can meet up with him easily. So we're tearing around this huge building, scared out of our minds, trying to text my dad while these two intimidating dudes are running after us, gaining speed and getting closer by the minute. Luckily, when we get to the entrance of the mall, we see my dad and the two guys that followed us reluctantly backed off. I'm very thankful for my dad, since the security guards at that mall were basically useless. And no bystanders asked us what we were running or hiding from. It may not seem too scary, but it was terrifying given we were only 14. Love shopping. It's easily my favorite thing to do, especially when seasons change and all the new clothes appear hanging neatly on gleaming silver racks. Last weekend, I decided to pay my favorite mall a visit. I was looking for a nice pair of spring flats to wear with my jean overalls. I got the flats and a little something extra I definitely did not pay for. Really, it was my own fault. I got so wrapped up in finding the perfect shoe that I tripped over his foot, nearly sending a carefully placed display of sunglasses to the floor along with my own clumsy self. I apologized, instantly embarrassed and flustered, but he didn't seem upset. He actually looked quite amused. I assumed it was because my face took on him becoming shade of hot red, but maybe it was my panic at the thought that I might have hurt his ankle and all the commotion. Now I kind of wish I had. After getting up and trying fruitlessly to regain my dignity, I took a good look at the man accidentally assaulted. He looked at least 30 tall, dark-haired, lanky, and a bit hunched over. I guess he must have worked at a desk all day. The features that really caught my attention though were his teeth, pearly white and straight, like in a toothpaste commercial. He must have noticed me looking, because after that he smiled too much. I excused myself and backed away from him, apologizing one last time for not paying much attention to my surroundings, and then left the store. And there were plenty more shoe stores in the mall I could shop in if only to get the sour taste of that humiliating encounter out of my mouth. I ended up going to 3 more stores before finding the right shoes. As I was standing at the till and ready to purchase the newest addition to my footwear collection, the woman working the registers smiled adoringly at me, and then at something behind me. I turned my head and saw the man with the teeth staring unblinkingly at me, a bright white grin plastered on his face. As I flinched and asked the woman how long you'd been standing there, she said she'd seen him watching me since I entered the store and assumed he was just my bow waiting for me. I wondered if he'd followed me to the other stores as well, but I hadn't been paying attention. I bought the shoes and slowly made my way out of the store, feeling him watching me through the glass. As soon as I stepped out of the shop, he started towards me. I quickly weaved through a group of people and hurried towards the doors that came through, praying he wouldn't catch me before I made it to my car. Groping through my purse to find my keys, I cursed myself for not having them on hand. Just as I pushed through the doors and was momentarily blinded by the sun. Conveniently, I managed to squeeze my tiny car into a parking space right close to the doors, and I practically jumped for joy when my hand finally closed around the sharp metal of my key. I saw the flash of the mall door open just as I unlocked the door and squished myself in my seat. The man stalled as he walked into the sunlight, probably also stunned by the brightness of the day. He squinted and smiled when he saw me pull out of the parking lot. I would have to drive by him to get out. I sped up and triple-checked that my doors were locked before preparing to pass this terrifying stranger. As my car came out about an arm's length away, the man smiled his deranged smile, stuck one of his hands into his mouth, and pulled out a set of dentures. He then shrieked and threw them in my car. I haven't returned to that mall since. And I don't plan to.